love our jobs, but working in the library can be stressful. We help patrons meet their physical and mental health needs by providing access to reliable health information and programs, outreach focused on health and wellness, but we don't do a good job of looking inward at our own well-being. The well-being of library workers in their community is really important. Let's see, can I move this over here? Yes. So what I'm going to try to do today is cover a few things. We're going to explore the benefits of a healthy workplace. So we're going to talk about how having a healthy workplace benefits you as an individual, the library as a whole, and the community. We're going to explore exactly what a healthy workplace looks like, identify some changes that can be made at the individual level, although I do focus on the organizational institutional level. Those have a bigger effect. And because I'm from the National Library of Medicine, I am going to focus on some resources from NNLM because that's where we come from. So the first thing I needed to do when I started talking about this was define what are we talking about when we're talking about health and wellness. Those words have sort of taken off, and I think the wellness industry is like a $4 billion industry at this point. But I really liked this definition I found from the World Health Organization because it states that health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. And I really like that because it is a holistic approach to health, and it's not merely eliminating negative aspects, but actively working to create positive, healthy things for our physical and mental health. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the physical aspect of library. And I think this is often what comes to mind when people are thinking about health in the workplace. And when I first started looking into this and health and wellness in libraries, I came across a lot of examples that were focused on walking clubs, healthy snacks, mindfulness practices, and getting enough sleep. And some of these are part of a healthy workplace, but some of them aren't. And I don't recommend them. And there's research about why, and we'll talk about that. You often hear emotional and mental health mentioned interchangeably, and attempts to find a clear definition will yield significant overlap between the two. But according to Medline Plus, our mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. So again, there's that holistic aspect, and it affects how we think, feel, and act as we cope with life. It can determine how we handle stress, relate to others, and make choices. Similarly, there's a definition of emotional health on the National Institutes of Health website. Emotional health is the ability to successfully handle life stresses and adapt to change and difficult times. So we're going to use these terms sort of grouped together for the purposes of this presentation. And really quickly, I want to outline what we're not going to talk about today. For a number of reasons. So the first one is I will not be talking about weight or weight loss. There is a plethora of research that focusing on weight and diets triggers eating disorders in people, can re-trigger old eating disorders, body dysmorphia. It can create divides between staff who feel like they can't eat in the library or in the break room anymore because they're being judged by other staff. Particularly, a lot of what we know now about weight and the indication of health is that weight is not the best indicator of a physical or mental health. And how we often judge weight and health is based on the body mass index, or the BMI, which was developed using European men and was never intended as an indicator of health. And in fact, its use as an indicator of health now is rooted in racism. So weight is out, we're not doing that. Similarly, workplace programs that focus on walking or other movements are ableist and just aren't necessary in the workplace. It's just not, it creates competition and can create divisiveness between staff. So we don't focus on those, we focus on enabling people to make healthy choices that they choose to make. The next one is faux health and wellness. And this one is maybe things that have no proven benefit to you and in fact may harm you. So one of them I like to give as an example in the fall, where it's closer than you think, September is not that far away. we'll start seeing headlines about ways to prevent the cold and the flu. And one of my favorites I like to use as an example is claims that drinking tea and wine can prevent the flu. And if you actually click through and find the study the article is citing, what it talks about is eating more plants can help with flu resilience. And the tea and the wine claim is a bit of a stretch. You're actually far better off eating green leafy vegetables, but we really like that tea and wine headline. It's a lot better. And even librarians are susceptible to confirmation bias and quick fixes. The last one is wellness as a commodity. And this is really just sort of things that are trendy, that can be helpful, but aren't necessary. So I like to use fitness trackers or fitness apps. So if you're using a Fitbit or something like that, the 10,000 steps a day goal was made up in Japan by a company looking to sell pedometers. So there isn't any real indication around that. You also have other ways to track your activity time or distance that don't require either a device at all. Similarly, unless you're an Olympic athlete or have heart disease, you probably don't need to know your exact heart rate while exercising. So these tools are okay and they can be nice, but they also sometimes come with other privacy violations or privacy concerns when using them. So I just don't mess with them when it comes to workplace wellness. So what is a healthy workplace then? If it's not any of those things that I just talked about, what is it? So let's look at a couple things. Ergonomics, I think, is a really easy one that a lot of us think of. And I know in a lot of libraries, I've worked in public libraries since I was 16, you can be using outdated furniture, especially desks that generally tend to be about 4 inches too high for the average person. So if you have a desk that doesn't have an adjustable height, chances are you're working at a desk that isn't the correct height for you. Similarly, if people are sharing a desk for any reason and it doesn't adjust height-wise, chances are at least one of them is working on a desk that's not the correct height for them. So there's a lot of good information out there about ergonomic evaluation, and that you can do that online yourself. We get a partner to help you. Similarly, as we look, oops, did I not advance? Okay, sorry, I apologize. Similarly, there are ergonomic guidelines out there for standing desks as well. So one of the recommendations that we like to talk about is providing a standing desk or adjustable height desk for library workers. Some people find that staff don't want these. I've heard of a library say maybe getting 1 or 2 and allowing staff to try them out for a couple of months. And if they still want one and are using it, then they go ahead and buying it rather than just buying them automatically for everyone. If you do move this direction, make sure you read up on the research about it. You don't want to spend like too much time standing either. So sitting too much is bad, but also standing too much is bad. The goal is to be about 50-50 when you're done. So take a look at those. And there are a huge price range on models for adjustable height desks. Some are just mechanical where you're turning a crank to raise them up and down. You can have ones that are electric and you're just pushing a button to upper or lower it. So there are a lot of options out there for that. Something we often don't think about is the air in the building. And you probably think about this when you think about someone making popcorn in the microwave or maybe bringing in leftover fish to put in the microwave. Those are the smells that we often find are pretty strong to have in a shared space. But the other thing is temperature. And I think if you've worked in a library, I know I have worn fingerless gloves at work, kept a cardigan at my desk, used a space heater under my desk, trying to get things warmed up. And often the temperature in the library is out of our control. It's set by maintenance or another facilities person, or you have an outdated system that just sort of I can remember one library I worked at, you had to flip a switch to turn the heat and the air on. And once you made the decision to turn the air on for the summer, that was it. There was no going back to heat. And the control range was kind of all over the place. But there are some studies that show that having a comfortable temperature in the office can help reduce errors by 44%. and increase productivity or output by 150%, which is a lot. One of the things that I have done in past places to help was that we would all agree on a temperature that was comfortable. And often what we would find if someone felt too warm or too cool, that we would go look at the thermostat. We had a separate thermostat that had a digital display, and we could see, oh, it's actually at the temperature we agreed on. If I'm chilly, maybe I need to get up and move around. Now, I've also been the person that's too warm in the office, and I know there's only so many layers of clothes that you can take off. So I definitely encourage, if possible, to control the temperature in the workplace. There's also some studies that show being physically warm can lead to social warmth, which is like having the workplace at a comfortable temperature can increase your social warmth or your warm feelings between staff, and this improves morale and collaboration. But it can also improve staff interactions with patrons, which I thought was really interesting. Air quality is another one that we often don't think of, but can have a really big impact. The quality of the air in the library can have a pretty negative impact on our health. So in old buildings, you're talking about pollutants from inside, from just wear and tear and that kind of thing. In new buildings, you might be talking about leftover fumes and things in the air from paint and other building materials. But you can also have pollutants coming in from the outside air that are coming in through the system due to poor filtration. Indoor air quality can include things like mold, dampness, etc. And these things are an annoyance, but they can also make chronic health issues such as allergies worse, and they can trigger asthma attacks. And even people without allergies can experience irritations of the eye, nose, throat, lungs, etc. when being exposed to irritants in the air. And having these feelings at work or being exposed to this at work can lead to more sick days, obviously, or just a general lack of productivity when in the library because you just don't feel well. So if exposure to, so the air is good, but also exposure to natural light is really important. And it's been interesting to read how we've focused more and more on this. We've gone away from the recommendation of having these huge office buildings with lots of bright fluorescent lights. Now they actually want lower light overhead lights and a bit more ability to control light in your individual space. So fluorescent lights can be irritating to library staff members for a number of reasons, including some people can hear the sound from them. The flicker of the light can cause eye strain and headaches. And so just reevaluating the library we have in our workspace. Exposure to natural light actually improves our overall feelings of well-being. It can reduce eye strain, headaches, and drowsiness. And it improves productivity. So one study showed that there was a 70% improvement in workplace performance in an office that included natural light. And of course, if natural light is better, exposure to nature is even better. So studies show that exposure to nature throughout the workday can have a direct impact on workers' physical and mental health, including decreasing levels of diastolic blood pressure, that's the bottom number of your blood pressure reading, and help to speed recovery from illness. Exposure to nature at work can also reduce the impact of stress on the mind and body, increase attention capacity, improve psychological well-being. Exposure to nature, including plant life, improves our mental and physical well-being. So we'll talk a little bit more about how you can do that in the next part. And noisy workspaces. The world around us in general is getting louder, and that obviously includes our workplaces. Many libraries have open office plans or use cubicles that expose us to background noise ranging from the sounds of others typing to being forced to overhear conversations. I know I've worked in places that had cubicles or open floor plans, and you try to cope with headphones or other things to drown out the distraction. So exposure to this noise can be frustrating and stressful, but it also can make us up to 66% less productive at work. And people who work in an open floor plan or open office plan take 60 to 70% more sick days than other people. So not just the stress, but like being exposed to the germs and things like that, which obviously we know more about now with COVID. One study found that the distractions caused by cubicles negatively affect employee satisfaction and productivity significantly. So being able to work free from distractions from noise and having an actual office is with a closing door is the best. Cubicles that have walls that are high enough to keep noise out and provide some privacy are helpful. But again, there's lots of things that can get around cubicle walls. The visual impacts of the space around us affect us. So a report from the St. Louis Area Business Coalition said the visual design of a workplace has been shown to impact employees' moods, morale, and productivity. And this includes things that maybe we don't think of, or once they're pointed out, you're like, oh yeah, obviously. So this includes things like the colors of the walls, the carpet, the appearance of the carpet and the colors of the carpet, other materials and fixtures. So having natural materials, wood and those kind of things makes a difference. Plants and water features, the use of natural materials and furniture, the artwork that's on the walls, the ceiling height, and just the ability to get up and go outside and interact with nature can make a really big difference. So let's talk a little bit about emotional and mental aspects of a healthy workplace. And I just want to say, I cannot see the chat the way the screens are set up. So if if you're asking a question, I cannot see it, but I will definitely try to address those at the end. So the emotional and mental environment at work, there's a lot of things that go into this. And the first one I always like to talk about is salary and paying a living wage. A living wage is one of the social determinants of health that's mentioned in the Healthy People 2020 and 2030 initiatives. And this really means that workers don't have to choose between filling a prescription or putting gas in their car, selecting healthy fruits and vegetables at the grocery store, or just knowing how they'll get by if an emergency bill comes up. It's important to note that the living wage is not the poverty level. The poverty level in the United States is very low, and people living above the poverty level are still the working poor and not working at a living wage. The other aspect of that is providing an equal salary to men and women for the same work. We know in 2018 in the US, women were still earning 85% of what men earned. And during the pandemic, women left the workforce in droves, setting back the progress we had made on this possibly for years. This gap is also true when comparing apples to apples. That is like managers to managers or the same position in the same role. The last time that Library Journal did a survey that included gender was in 2017, and that gap was there for librarians as well. It's important to note the salary gap for women who are Black, Asian, Latinx, and Native American is much larger. So let's talk a little bit about work-life balance and schedules. And I think this is the one that always makes managers start to get a little anxious. But stick with me, keep an open mind. In today's always on, always connected world, work-life balance is something a lot of us strive for, but what do we mean by that? And this is generally the idea of balancing the demands of work on our time and mental energy with the other aspects of our life. So the interesting thing is that there is a lot of research that shows workplaces that support work-life balance have happier and healthier employees. And one of the places I looked around for good examples of this, so it's interesting because you can read a lot about work-life balance, but like coming and finding a clear, like, okay, what does that look like? What is that list? Was a little bit hard, but I did find a good place on the Government Services Agency website. And so let's talk about some of the things that they talk about. Telecommuting. This is one. In the last year, we saw a lot of libraries letting staff work from home during the pandemic. So we do know that it's possible. Telecommuting is allowing employees to work remotely from home or another location of their choice 1 or 2 days a week, or even 1 or 2 days a week can improve employee job satisfaction, performance, and help reduce turnover. There are studies that show that employees who telecommute are at lower risk for alcohol misuse, physical inactivity, and tobacco use. One of the common concerns I hear about letting people work remotely or telecommute is how will you know if they're working? And the way you do that is if the work is getting done. You don't know that people are working if they're in the building, they're just physically present. And we often take physical presence for productivity, and it's not. Even before social media, we would stand around the water coolers and talk about I don't know, Lost or Melrose Place or something from back in the day. So the really important thing to remember is if you're using a telecommuting policy and someone's work isn't getting done, what you have is a productivity problem and not a working from home problem. You have clear goals for staff and what they're expected to do during the work from home time. I strongly recommend resisting the urge to micromanage and have strict requirements about being availability and those kind of things. Deep work means you can't be checking Skype or Slack or something like that constantly. And deep work is where we do some of our best work. I know libraries have desks that they need to staff and shifts that need to be covered. But you, with some out of the box thinking, and I think if you're considering this, you bring all the staff together and have honest conversations about expectations and what that might look like, what everybody feels like might be fair. There are some people whose job requires them to be in the library, but you could maybe allow some staff to work from home one day a week or a couple mornings a week. This really can make a huge difference in the amount of work people are able to get done, but also just how happy and satisfied they are at work. So you can see here a list of the benefits of telecommuting. Really makes a huge impact. And I'm going to tie that into the second one, which is flexible work schedules. And that's flex time, or allowing employees to flex their work schedule, has similar benefits to telecommuting. Flexible schedules allow people to work outside their work hours around the needs of the library and their personal lives. So it could mean some people are coming into work a little bit later and then staying later, and some people are coming in early and leaving early, whether that is to take care of appointments they have in the morning or the afternoon. So, you can work with staff and talk about how this might work and what it would look like. But we know that people who are allowed to flex their schedules are generally more productive. They take less sick time. They tend to actually work more. They're happier while they're at work, and it reduces turnover. So just in general, allowing employees to have more control over their work schedule and the work time is associated with improved physical and mental well-being, and happier employees and a happier, healthier library. I also want to stress that either one of these policies should be available to everyone in the library. That should not be restricted in any way to parents or other people who have child responsibilities. We all have responsibilities outside of work, and these policies should be enacted equally. Really want to stress employee assistance programs. I think a lot of places have these, and we're all sort of reminded that, oh, hey, yeah, don't forget about our EAP. I really recommend regularly pushing that information out to staff and telling them directly how they access it and take advantage of it. Really improves mental health and well-being, especially to take advantage of that. This is the last one to touch on, and I don't know that I expect libraries to be able to do this, but I find it really fascinating. So this is again from that Government Services Agency website. And some of what they do is this, it's called Work Life for You, or Whole Life Care. And I really like these things because it really acknowledges that we spend a huge amount of time of our life at work, and a huge part of our life outside of it gets neglected or can become increasingly complicated. And just addressing a few things can really make a difference about how stressed out we are at work, how present we are when we're at work, those kind of things. And that these types of programs really do benefit the institution or the library or the agency where they're taking place. So let's talk a little bit about emotional and mental policies, official and unofficial. So things that we do at work, maybe that aren't necessarily official policies. Some of them could be, but they affect our mental well-being as well. So this one is one when I teach the class. Often people have, not everyone has heard of it. So emotional labor is displaying certain emotions while hiding others. And if you've worked a service desk in a library or anywhere else, you've done this, right? We are smiling sometimes when we don't want to, or being extra polite to people who maybe, are pushing that boundary. So we're expected to perform this emotional labor when interacting with our patrons, but we also often do it with our colleagues as well, especially people who are in one minority group or another may do this while reacting to microaggressions or other types of things in the workplace. And performing emotional labor, it decreases our job satisfaction, it causes emotional exhaustion, and contributes to burnout. There are some things that we can't, there's a limit to how much emotional labor we can do at work. If you're interacting with the public, you're going to need to do this, but there are ways to cope with that. And that's ensuring that we have some private space to process those feelings after they happen, in as much as possible. Encourage the type of work environment where you don't experience this while you're working with your colleagues. This is one of the reasons, another reason why I recommend against cubicles or open office floor plans. People need time to compose themselves sometimes and have some quiet space to reflect and not feel that their behavior is being scrutinized, especially after a particularly emotional interaction. Invisible labor is another one that can really seem small, but take up a lot of space in our mental well-being at work. And these are really just the small social interactions that make the workplace more socially cohesive. Things like planning events, buying condolences card, bringing in food for coworkers for special days or everyday occasions, cleaning up after those events. It also could include things as helping coworkers with projects. And what we know is that women perform more of this type of labor at work, and not just that they do it, but that's expected of them. So much so that when men contribute to this type of labor at work, it's considered heroic, not the norm. And invisible labor is still labor, and performing it can be exhausting. So it's important to divvy up this type of work or agree that you're just not going to have these kind of things happen. If you are going to have people in charge of social events or those kind of things, it should be included in their performance reviews. This is work they're doing at work that helps the team in cohesiveness, and so it should be acknowledged and appreciated. And if you're doing this kind of work, you should definitely share that you are performing it. So just being aware that this is happening, acknowledging it, and striving to make it equal is really important. Cultural humility is another important aspect of our wellness at work, not only in our interactions with our patrons, but with other staff as well. It is a practice of self-reflection on how our own backgrounds and expectations can impact a situation, of openness and being open to others determining the relevance of their own identities to any given situation, and committing to redress the effects of power imbalances. So in practice, an organization that encourages cultural humility encourages employees to move away from the position of expert to one of student and lifelong learner. The library should embrace accountability for cultural humility at each level, empowering employees to be culturally humble, and as an organization, incorporate cultural humility into policies and decision-making practices. And this cultural humility is a lifelong learning practice. This is not something you ever achieve. This is something you continually strive for. Compassion fatigue is a topic I heard a lot about several years ago when I was traveling at conferences. This concept initially initiated with nurses, people in the health profession, sort of migrated into social workers, and now has spread out to many who work in helping professions like library workers. So we are at risk for compassion fatigue. This is a state that is experienced by helping people or animals in distress, and it's an extreme state of tension and preoccupation with the suffering of those being helped, to the degree that it can create secondary traumatic experience for the helper. So if you're working a service desk and you've helped people who are experiencing trauma, whether they're having a mental or physical traumatic experience, then you can get this compassion fatigue. So some of the things that we can do to help prevent compassion fatigue is to pay adequate wages, provide adequate workspace, this space to process and get away, to have time to process those emotions and to do so privately. This relates to a lot of other things that we talked about earlier. So sometimes what this can look like is excessive blaming, bottled up emotion, people who are isolating themselves from others. If people are receiving an unusual amount of complaints, if people are voicing complaints about administrative functions, Sometimes people misuse substances such as alcohol or other substances to mask feelings. Compulsive behaviors such as overspending, overeating, gambling, sexual addictions, poor self-care, including hygiene and appearance. So sometimes what we see happening in a person in the library can be a reflection of the trauma they've experienced through working with patrons. This sort of leads to burnout, which is another thing that librarians have started to experience. And a lot of the parts of librarianship and how we perceive our role in the community, how we perceive librarianship, often it feels like a calling for a lot of us, myself included, as somebody who realized recently that they were experiencing some burnout, that we have this sort of idea that libraries are a magical place, and they are, I guess, but it can lead us to us making some unhealthy choices. And the workplace we work in can help contribute to this. So let's talk about that. Some things include lack of control over our own duties and responsibilities, unclear job expectations, dysfunctional workplace dynamics, extremes of activities. So like a lot of us, we did a lot of virtual programming and those kind of things over the last year and a half. If there's a disconnect between work-life balance, so expectation to stay late, be available after you've left for the day, those kind of things can contribute from the library. Some things personally make you more likely to experience burnout include you identify as struggling with your work, that you lack a balance between your work life and your personal life. You have a high workload, including overtime work. You try to be everything to everyone. You work in a helping profession. You feel you have little or no control over your work. Your job is monotonous. And yeah, so many of us in libraries are definitely at risk for this. And so just being aware as a workplace that this is a potential hazard, and there are things to know that you can do to alleviate it. So just kind of to recap some of the things I talked about, these benefits of a healthy workplace: increased job satisfaction, so happier, healthy employees, people who are happy to be at the library, improved mental health overall, so just generally improved mental health, which improves our interactions with our patrons and with our fellow staff members. Improved physical health. It can often be hard to be happy mentally if you're not feeling well physically. Reduced turnover. New people requires training and time out to replace them, so we always want to reduce that if we can. Increased performance, so that's actually in terms of productivity and creativity while in the library. People will take fewer sick days or have less amounts of presenteeism, which is being at work but not actually working. It'll give the library a positive reputation in the community. If your employees are happy to come to work, that shows, and people in the communities talk, which can help improve customer satisfaction, just having a positive place. And it's really important to remember, that the way to do those things is to empower staff to make the choices for their well-being, and not to say, we're going to create a positive workspace and you're going to be positive. That doesn't work very well. So what can you do in your library? I know I gave a huge list and it can seem daunting. I know many libraries are underfunded. You may be working in old buildings with outdated furniture, etc. So the physical environment, let's look at that first. And what I like to tell people is to continue to aim for the best, but work with what you have. Chances are you're not going to get a new building tomorrow that can have the perfect workspace. So look at how you might be able to reuse the space you have and allow staff to have windows with access to natural light. We often save the best spaces in our library for patrons, which is really nice. But we also want to make sure our staff are working in good spaces too, especially when many of us are there 8 hours a day or more. Allow plants in personal and shared spaces. This can make a big difference. If you don't have a green thumb, maybe somebody in the library does. Remember, taking care of the plants is invisible labor, and it should be part of their job description. If you can, provide standing or adjustable height desks, in particular in shared spaces, when you are going to need to adjust the height for different people. It's important when looking at standing height desks that you make sure that they go low enough. I don't have the article at hand, but I can find it. The most desks are about 4 inches too high for the average person, and that includes standing desks. And so finding ones that really go down low makes a big difference. I remember when I had, I'm at the university, so we have somebody come do ergonomic evaluations. And I was shocked at how low he had me put my desk down at, but it really made a big difference. Create private workspaces. I've been in libraries where we've remodeled old spaces to house more people than were originally planned in there. Something that was a director's office now has 4 staff members in it. These are not good floor plans for all the reasons we talked about. So if you can at least put up cubicle walls, that can help. Again, not ideal, but it's still working with what you have. Good air quality. Again, this might be out of your control, especially in buildings with older HVAC systems. You can limit fragrance at work, and a lot of workplaces are doing that if people are particularly susceptible to strong fragrances, to limit that in the office. Make sure that your HVAC unit is serviced and has a good filter and those kind of things. Encourage lunches and breaks away from the desk. So this is really important about creating a culture at work where we prioritize self-care and boundaries, which means going out for lunch or going to the break room for lunch, or if you can create an outdoor space that's inviting, that's for staff to use that for lunch, even if it's a half an hour. I will admit I'm one of the people who likes to take a half-hour lunch. Do as I say, not as I do. Those kind of things. All right. Air, light, noise, and aesthetics. Allow fans and space heaters with safety features in individual workspaces. This is really important. Include fans because often staff members who are going through hormonal changes or have hormonal fluctuations can be really hot one minute and then cool the next. And so having a little bit more control over their personal space is helpful. I've been in libraries a long time. I can certainly remember sneaking heaters in under my desk. Most space heaters these days have a safety feature where if they get tipped over, they're going to turn off. So you can allow those kind of things. Indoor plants, I know I've said this several times, but it can make a huge difference for the people who like them and enjoy them. Even in public spaces or in the public shared space at the library or the shared staff spaces, there's some plants that do particularly well with low light and no natural light and can kind of be neglected. Try to create an inviting outdoor area and encourage employees to use it. If you can create one that is just for employees, that would be ideal so that you have space away from the public when you're using it. If you're stuck with open floor plans or cubicle situation, if you can provide private space for meetings and private phone calls. So, have a room, something where people can sit down and talk to their doctor, their kids, something if they have something that has come up, or just one-on-one meetings, or just a place to go, step inside, collect your thoughts, breathe deeply, think calmly for 5 minutes, those kind of things. And then just encourage people to make adjustments that they need to improve their health. So create an environment where that is possible. Policies. If people want to telecommute and you can figure out a way to do that, I just definitely recommend it. It's, I think, some really low-hanging fruit, and this last year has certainly made it easier to see that that's a possibility. I know some people don't like it or don't find it works for them for one reason or another. I have a good friend who really wants to go into the office, and that's okay. But for people who want to take advantage of it, personally, I'm more productive, more focused at home. So if you can allow that, especially around appointments or other kind of things, it really can make a big difference. The flex time as well. Again, having open conversations with the staff before enacting these policies can really make a big difference. Talking about expectations, what it might look like, have a conversation about what people think that this should look like, that kind of thing. I know it can get to a point where staff are worried about whether other staff are working. That's not their business. It's the business of the supervisor. I like to show this sort of how important the organizational culture is for these kind of things. So you actually see this below human resources and supervision. So just creating a culture that's truly focused on staff wellness in a flexible and healthy way is really important. Cultural humility. This is an ongoing process for you as an individual, but also for your library, and having a commitment to self-reflection, openness, and lifelong learning. This is a huge list of additional recommendations I'm going to go through pretty quickly because I want to make sure I have time for questions at the end. This list is from the ALA APA website. And it really focuses on ways that help employees and staff feel empowered. So this is a great list. I am going to share the slides with Robin. I don't think you're going to get to have them right away, but you'll have them eventually. So, okay, we talked about what the library can do, and we talked about some limitations the library might have. So if you're working in a library that has limitations, even one that's making progress, there might be some things that you want to do as an individual. And what I really like to focus on, that this can happen at the same time, and libraries should not put all of the responsibility onto individuals. You can practice as much personal self-care if you want. If you don't have a good environment at work, you're not going to be happy and healthy. So these are the 8 dimensions of health. These originally came from SAMHSA. People forget the mental part in the SAMHSA and talk on the substance misuse of that agency. But they did this really great program several years ago where they looked at 8 dimensions of health. And if you Google this, you'll be able to find a wide variety of variations on this. So what they're talking about here is emotional is our ability to cope efficiently or effectively with life and create satisfying relationships. Environmental is having good health by occupying a pleasant and stimulating environment that support our well-being. Financial health, our satisfaction with our current financial situation and hopes for the future. Intellectual, recognizing our creative abilities and finding ways to expand our knowledge and skills. Occupational, this is our satisfaction with work and the enrichment we get from our work. Physical, recognizing our need for physical activity, foods that nourish the body and make us feel well, and having good sleep. Social is a sense of connection and belonging and having a community that we feel like we are part of and supports us and we can support them. And spiritual is just having a sense of purpose and meaning in your life. This isn't necessarily religious, but this is a really nice way to start to break down the different parts of your life. And if you feel, thanks Margie, if you feel like one of them isn't doing well, then that's the place to focus on. It also, I think, sometimes we get really gung-ho about self-improvement and try to do everything at once. And it's a lot easier to make small changes and pick one thing and start there and go from there. Know your resources. So here's my plug for Medline Plus. If you're not familiar, Medline Plus is a free, reliable, evidence-based consumer health resource. I recommend it to my patrons and public library patrons especially. It's from the National Library of Medicine. It's the world's largest medical library. And this has a plethora of resources about a wide range of things, including in other languages. And the homepage is going to give you a link to things like a medical encyclopedia, drug and herbal database. I'm going to show that in the next slide. It has multimedia images. One thing to keep in mind, there is no smartphone app for Medline Plus. It is mobile responsive, so it's going to adjust on the screen in your browser on your mobile phone. It's a really great place to start. All the information on here has been vetted by librarians at the National Library of Medicine. So when you're looking for health information, you're getting reliable evidence-based information from this site. And here's sort of the link or the picture at the bottom of the screen so you can see this encyclopedia, tests, video, etc. It also has a great section on drugs, just herbs and supplements. We are, in the US, we're expanding our approach to medicine to complementary and supplemental medicine, and more people are looking at using herbs and supplements. This not only will give you great information about what they can and can't do or what's been proven, but also we'll talk about some of possible interactions with medications that you might be taking, which is something a lot of us don't think about. Evaluate the news you're receiving online and in headlines. We're as susceptible, librarians are susceptible to confirmation bias and misinformation as everybody else. I love a headline that says I can eat chocolate and go to the gym just like you do. That's what I want to hear. But you can dig a little deeper. Just use your favorite. I think this crap is going out of style these days, and people like this trust it or trash it better. There's also this one for health apps. So if you're considering adding an app on health to your phone, a lot of them, none of them are really regulated. And so think kind of carefully about why you're looking for the app and what you want it to do. How secure is the data that you're putting into the app? If the app is free, where are they selling your data to make money? If there's hidden prices, if other people have things, who, where do they, what's their motivation? Try mindfulness. I think this has gotten very popular in the last couple of years. There's a lot of apps out there that will help you do this. You don't need any of them. You can practice this at home by yourself. You can just Google like 5 or 10 minute mindfulness practice. There's a lot of free YouTube videos out there. But the great news is there's actually a lot of evidence that this works. For me personally, I participated 2 summers ago at the university called mindfulness-based stress reduction. And it was, I'm not a person who was really into that kind of thing before I did it. But I came out, feel like when I remember to do it, it makes a huge difference. And like everyone, I struggle, right? That's everything, right? If you do it, it makes a difference. So like everyone, I struggle with this, but it really can be very helpful. In particular, if you find one type of doesn't work for you, try a different one. You can actually do mindful walking. You can do mindful eating. You can just sit and do mindfulness for 5 minutes. Some people really like the full body scan part of mindfulness that can take longer time. Not my personal favorite. So just try different ways that work for you. And remember, you don't have to spend money to do it. You can, like anything, but you don't need to. Some parts of you at work. So make sure you're using your vacation time, lunch breaks, etc. We have a culture in this country, sort of that it's heroic, or I know people have bragged about having, maxing out their vacation time and, having forced to use it or lose it. You are a better worker when you take your vacation time. You're a better coworker. You're a better customer service person. All the research shows how important vacation time is. Be sure to use your vacation time. Similarly, take those lunch breaks, even if you're working from home. Get up, get away from the screen for 20, 30 minutes, just do something else. Know your limitations and don't be a perfectionist. You do not have to personally be everything to everyone. This is something I repeat to myself a lot. Go home on time and don't stay late. The work is always going to be there. It will never end. Don't take work home with you. I know people who worked from home who at the end of the day would go out, get in their car and drive around for 5 minutes and come home to make that break between work and home life. So there are ways to do that, to kind of leave that behind you. So if you don't have a commute, come up with a ritual that helps you disconnect. Identify activities that help you relax and make sure to make time for them. Beware of preparing to live syndrome, which I thought was really interesting when I came across this, but essentially you keep putting off the things that you want to do until, to the future. I'll do that later. I'll do that next year. I'll do that when this thing has happened. Just be careful that you're not doing that a lot. And then develop a network of supportive friends and family. So a lot of this looks like some of the stuff we saw earlier, right? Your physical environment at work, add a plant if you can, if you have a green thumb. Designate quiet times. This is a recommendation I make for people who have a shared workspace. If you're sharing an office space or cubicle space, that you can get together and agree on quiet times where people will just be working quietly. You can wear headphones. I definitely don't recommend listening to anything like that as a story or a podcast. You want just sort of background noise that helps you focus. Be conscious of your fragrances at work. Definitely do an ergonomic assessment if you haven't done one. This is the Facebook group that Robin was mentioning. I just started it, I think, a month ago. I was using a page for this idea, but I wanted it to be more democratic and more inclusive. So if you just Google fostering wellness in libraries or fostering wellness in the library workplace, you'll come across this group. I try to share articles in there regularly. You are most welcome to join and share your own articles. It's not just for me sharing stuff. You can also ask questions. Do be sure when you join to agree to the group rules. There's just a few basic things, but that's a thing. Robin is right. The book is coming. I just got a link this week from the publisher. I think it's in the ALA store, and I'm turning in the final chapters. So this is going to be a handbook for libraries. It's going to dig deeper into a lot of this. As part of the book, we are also going to be creating a companion website to have additional resources to explore for people who are looking to dig deeper. This class, Wellness in the Workplace from the National Library of Medicine, is a 2-week 4 continuing education credit class. It's asynchronous online. Right now, it is not scheduled yet for this coming period, just because we are transitioning to a new website, and that transition has been a little rocky. So it will be offered hopefully in the fall. I hope to offer it 3 times before April 30th, basically. So if you're interested in digging deeper into any of this or looking at more resources, this is a free class. If you want to know when that class is going to be offered, the best recommendation I can make for you right now is to sign up for this newsletter. I send it out once a month. It goes out on the 2nd Tuesday of the month, and in it, I include upcoming classes, webinars, and other events. Once the website is up, there might be other ways to get notified of that, but that's the best choice for you right now. That is it. I've got about 7 minutes left, so I'm happy to take any questions. Oh yeah, Margie, you got the inside scoop with Margie. I know I went over a lot of things. There's a lot of aspects in work-life wellness. And like I said, it's best to start on one thing and continue to focus. Oh, I went for it.
So this is Robin. I want to thank everybody for attending. If you do have questions, I'm sure that you can reach Bobbi by email if you don't have any right now. We do thank you for attending. Because this is part of the grant application, this webinar attendance, you will need this following code, KLA Health 2021, for the grant application. There's actually a slot on the grant application to fill that out. And I see the chat box is buzzing up here. Let me see what's going on. They put Bobbi's contact information in the chat. So we want to thank everybody for being here today. It's been a great, a lot of information, Bobbi. Thank you. And a lot of things to think about. So we really hope that the attendees can take this information and turn it back around and really have some great initiatives for their libraries. So thank you again, Bobbi. Thanks for attendees, and onward.
Yeah, before we close, I did drop in the chat the link to the Kansas Health and Wellness Grant that we're offering. So please take a look at that. It's a great opportunity to get grant funding from KLA to initiate a program to help the library workers that you are spending most of your time with. And I'm sure if you have any questions about this, Bobbi would be happy to answer them. She dropped her email in the chat. I always send out information about upcoming classes, and I hope to be collaborating with Bobbi on that Moodle class. So I'll keep you posted. Yeah, please do take advantage of that grant application. And yeah, it's been a pleasure having Bobbi here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bobbi.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, I hope nobody gets overwhelmed. Think of it as all the opportunities there are to pick one or two things rather than too much to do.